I'm happy to introduce our success story for today, and that's Armeda Reitzel from Humboldt State University. She's also taught at the University of the Redwoods, which is just down the street from her. And she's having the luxury of being retired as of the last
Yes.
couple of months. But she's been working with us for multiple years for multiple projects. And one of the last projects that she did was building or expanding a set of ancillaries for this interpersonal communications book that was shown just a few minutes ago. But it's nice to hear it directly from Armida. So take it away, Armida.
Okay, well, I'm really excited. I absolutely love LibreText because for me, LibreText, free the text, Libre professor, free the professor. There's so much you can do, especially when it comes to ancillaries. And I'm going to give you a warning right off the bat. I absolutely love alliteration. So if you add things to the chat, I'm going to give you an extra credit point if you have alliteration there. But I really do see that ancillaries are something that LibreTexts, well, they're just professionals at doing this and promoting this and getting students excited about this. And that's the angle I'm going to be coming from, not only from the instructor's perspective, but also from the student's perspective as well. Because after all, in open pedagogy, the students become the instructor. So that's going to be the focus of what I'm going to be talking about today. And please, 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 I love interaction. Whenever I teach a class, I always try to get somebody to volunteer to be a chat helper. I give them 1 point extra credit. So Delmar, you're going to be my chat helper today, and I'll give you extra credit at the end. Anybody, please feel free to put questions in there. Every so often, Delmar, I'll ask you if there are any questions there. And there'll be some chance. I've got a couple of questions for you along the way too, where I'm going to be asking you to consider making a contribution to the chat. So why use open educational resources? Well, I suspect you're all here because you really already believe in doing this. But for me, the main reason to use open educational resources is for our students. It is something that opens up doors to them, that they have opportunities to learn through and with others through this open educational resource. And what's really great is OER has been around now long enough, thanks to LibreText. It's been around long enough that we can go back and look at earlier versions, how versions of LibreText documents have been revised along the way. In fact, that is a great assignment for students, that they take something that they are reading that's an OER and they themselves would add to it. So there's a lot of opportunities here for not only instructors to develop ancillary materials, but for the students themselves to develop ancillary materials. So here again, if you need to share this with your colleagues, please feel free to do so. I have the resource there at the bottom. Why use OER? Because they're affordable, flexible, customizable. That is one thing that I really, really like. If you'd like to talk about that regard to putting ancillaries into chapters, we can talk about that. They're up to date. You can add the latest research that's out there. That's something that I've done. I teach public discourse, so I'm looking at speeches and the impact of speeches on what's going on in the world today, and my students analyze those speeches. Well, it's very interesting since I've been using this for so long now to see how things change and how students bring their perspective in. It's really important, and I know Delmar and his crew really go above and beyond the call of duty here, that they're accessible, they're adaptable in many different platforms, and I'm just amazed with what LibreText has done and is continuing to do in terms of expanding. And they're beneficial to all. I like the idea that these kinds of resources are available to people all over the world. 15 years ago, I was a Fulbright scholar in Nicaragua, and it was really challenging to find resources that I could share with the different technicons and different schools that I was doing the teacher training at. I wish there'd been more open educational resources at that time that I could have pulled from. Fortunately, there are now. So the ubiquity, the universality of LibreText and other open educational resources, it's just amazing to me. Can you kind of tell that I'm enthusiastic about this just a little bit? Okay. And so why use ancillary materials? Again, it's for our students. It's for them. I don't know how many of you remember from way back when, at least for me, since I'm now retired, but when I was going to school, sure, I had to read books, I had to do all these assignments, etc. But I don't really remember very many of them. But what is something that you really do remember? Why do you remember that particular assignment, that ancillary material that brought that reading material alive for you? So what I'd like to do is give you a moment, if you're willing to share, think about an activity or an assignment that you remember to this day that really engaged you as a student. This could be high school, it could be undergraduate school, it could be graduate school. But when I asked you that question, was there an assignment or some kind of activity that popped into your head that, well, yeah, I kind of remember that even to this day? And well, we will have time to talk about it later on, but consider putting your idea into the chat. So we've got some different ideas there. I'd love to hear from you on that. Because for me, if you can remember an assignment or an activity that you used as a student, that you were engaged with as a student, that really speaks volumes. That tells you that that ancillary really was something that was helpful to you in developing your learning. Now, from a student's perspective, I had a very memorable assignment, and I want to tell you, this is an assignment that I had 48 years ago, people. I still remember it because I gave myself this question, what would I say in a chat? This was when my first year as a PhD student in speech communication. The professor wanted us to learn about the National Communication Association. So the assignment was to take a decade. And so we were each assigned a decade of journals to look at from the National Communication Association. Now, that could be a really deadly assignment. Let's be honest about that. It would be, oh my gosh, I've got to go through all these journals from the Quarterly Journal of Speech and go through all this kind of stuff and write up an assignment for it. Not very interesting. However, I made it interesting for myself, which then in turn made it interesting when I had to present it to the class. What did I do? What I did is I took a decade of journals from the National Communication Association. I went through them. I didn't write a paper on them, but I just wrote like a journal, little blurbs. So I did this over a course of a few weeks. So like every day I would read a couple and write my impressions of them. That's the important part. Not just what was in the article itself, but my impressions of it. And then what I did is putting it together. I didn't do the traditional term paper. I made a scrapbook. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers scrapbooks. I don't know if they're popular anymore, but back in the day, 50 years ago, scrapbooks were really popular. You put important things in there that you wanted to remember. So I created a scrapbook, and for each year during that decade, I put in a few of the articles, a quick little blurb about it, kind of like CNN headline news version of it, my impressions of it, why I thought it was important, what the trends were. I kind of put that into, and I developed a timeline for that decade. But when I put it together like a scrapbook. I'm a doodler. So I doodled things there. I added some cartoons that I found from the time frame that kind of went along with some of the rhetoric that I was reading about. And then when I put it together, I literally put it together like a scrapbook, and around the edges to show that this was an older decade, I actually used a match and kind of burnt the edges so it kind of looked old and worn, that this would be something that somebody might find in a treasure chest. And so that's how I presented the information. Now, I want to tell you, when I presented that to the class, granted, I was the only one who did it like that, but it was a way for me to also teach others, including my professor, what I saw as important during that decade. And so it's really exciting for me as a student. And to this day, I remember this. I don't have the scrapbook anymore with all the different moves I've had, but I remember that assignment. So as I say here, that assignment 48 years ago led to a whirlwind of engaging and enlightening educational experience. Notice the alliteration. And I have to say, now I'm playing with AI. So that was what AI generated for me for my whirlwind. So it's getting students, not just the professors involved in developing ancillaries, but getting students actually excited about the ancillaries. So this is some information. I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, but it talks about the quality of course materials. And I think this is really important. This is coming from the Community College Journal of Research and Practice. And I think it's interesting that it says that 74% of faculty indicated they use ancillary course materials. And so I think this is a good number. I'd love to have this done again to see what's more recent now. Are more people using ancillary materials? And that'll go along with some of the questions. So one question I've got for you right now, if you just put a quick little number or a yes or no or sometimes into the chat, how often do you use ancillary materials? How often do you use them as part of your teaching? I'd love to get an idea here what people in our audience think about this. Do you use ancillary materials? Do you look for ancillary materials? Do you create your ancillary materials? I'd love to know that. And in fact, one thing I might do, even though I am now retired, I would like to do a research study of this and see how the numbers have changed. So Delmar, I may be talking to you about another research study. And so what are ancillaries? Supplemental materials, and they are anything that could accompany an open textbook or open course. So any kind of material. And I know there are the traditional ones like quizzes, slides, instructor materials, different homework assignments that you can do. And so it's really important to think about, yeah, these are the traditional ones. And in the project that Delmar shared with you when we were working on the interpersonal communication textbook for the community college system, we brought in a lot of these traditional ones, but we also wanted to bring in some exciting project type of assignments that students could do. Kind of like that one I talked about when I did that scrapbook for the National Communication Association journals. I think it's really important to get students really excited and engaged. And so again, a little definition of what ancillaries are. I'll pass over this for the time being. And so where can you find ancillaries? LibreTexts, yay, that's my slogan here. LibreTexts, I want this as a bumper sticker next time, Jennifer. LibreTexts, a source for resources. And it truly, truly is. It's not just the content, but it's also resources, the ancillaries that go along with this. So open minds, open resources. It's an adaptable, user-friendly, open educational resource platform that educators trust for creating, customizing, and sharing accessible, interactive textbooks, adaptive homework, and ancillary materials. Couldn't have said it better myself. So I have a couple of questions for you right now. And what I'd like to do is give you a minute or two to answer these questions, either one or both, and then maybe we could do a quick share out a bit, Delmar, in just a minute. What types of ancillary materials would you like to see an OER offer? That is, if you're looking for an OER, what do you look for when it comes to ancillary materials? And the second question is, what types of ancillary materials have you created for your own OER that you may use in a classroom? So what would you like to see an OER offer? And what types of materials have you created? And so Delmar, give me an idea if anybody's contributing to the chat. I don't need it quite yet, but are there contributions?
So far, people want bumper stickers, but
I didn't mean to lead people astray with that. Anything coming up for this question or for the earlier ones?
slide decks and homeworks
Okay.
pop up.
Okay. And I think that's real important. That's one thing that when I was in as the team leader for the group that developed the ancillaries for the interpersonal communication textbook, that's one thing we thought about quite a bit when it came to the different types of materials. We did some traditional and then we did some non-traditional ones. And so I think it's really important to really think about what do you want and what have you created. And I think it's really important to share out open educational resources. It's a way to share your expertise as an educator. And I find that really exciting. I love having discussions with people about ideas that they've had and how they created that. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Anything I should address before I keep going, Delmar?
That's moving quite well.
Okay.
Nothing pops up immediately.
Okay, I'll just keep going. So some possible ones, the traditional question banks. Now, question banks, there's something that as an old professor who's had a lot of experience along the way, creating questions too, I will look at a question bank, but I actually don't tend to use them myself. I like creating my own. But a question bank is really, really helpful If you get stumped on something, or these are great for new instructors or for an instructor who gets a course at the last minute, they can be a godsend. They really, really can. But I find right now I'm also teaching for a correctional education program, Ashland University, and it's a fully, what I'm teaching is fully online. It's an upper division interpersonal class for them. Sometimes using question banks can be kind of challenging unless you really carefully think about what students might respond with. So I'm finding that to be true. So I actually, even though we created question banks, I tend not to use question banks myself personally. Lesson plans can be very, very helpful to get an idea of maybe some lab activities that could be done, or kind of interactive discussions that could be going on within a classroom. Again, I see it as a starting point, and you're only limited by your own creativity, building upon those ancillary suggestions that are there. So I look at ancillaries as suggestions. That's how I look at it. And lecture notes and slides. Delmar, you said people mentioned slide shows. Slides are very, very helpful along the way. Notes, giving kind of an idea of an outline format that's there that you as a professor can also modify as you'd like to see, bring your own examples in, just like the OER, bringing your own examples, your own expertise, your own tone of voice is so important when it comes to teaching. And OERs and the ancillaries allow you to do that. So this is what I find really exciting. In addition to everything I find exciting, is that OERs and the ancillaries allow you to be creative. You still add your mark to it. It's not just coming in as, quote, a substitute teacher. You really are the teacher and you're directing things, but you've got this support that's there. Videos are another one. I use videos a lot. I use podcasts a lot in what I do as well. And TED Talks, I have students analyzing TED Talks to get them into the idea of how do you analyze a speech that helps them become better speakers themselves. So there's a lot of different types of ancillaries, and I'm just going to go ahead and keep going here. So I want to talk for a moment about the specific project. And Delmar, you said you shared with them a little bit of what it looks like. I think this was a stroke of genius on the part of LibreTexts. It is so user-friendly. I absolutely love it. So when we developed this set of ancillaries, it was a year after the actual OER came out. And for interpersonal communication, context, and connection, we wanted to offer instructors and students a set of ancillaries that could help them delve deeper into material. Kind of highlight, kind of guide them as, hey, we kind of think this is important stuff you get the basics on, but then take it a step further. This is what you can do with that material. So we specifically in our grant focused in on 4 different types for every chapter. So there were 12 chapters. We divvied up things evenly among all 4 of us. And what's really cool, I have to share this with you. I was the lead for this, but one of the other professors was a former student of mine when she was a comm major as an undergraduate of mine. The second one, the other person, was a person I co-authored a couple of the chapters with in the OER. And the third person that was part of our group was somebody who joined the project, the OER project, a little later, but was very, very active in it. So it was really exciting for me to work with these 3 other individuals because we had different connections along the way. We represented different generations. Obviously, I was the oldest generation down to a much newer generation. We emphasized different areas of the state of California. I'm way up north in Humboldt County, which is basically, rather than saying California, it's like being in Southern Oregon. We're that far north. And then the other 3 were down in Southern California. I was very rural. I'm in the Redwoods, right by the ocean. Everybody else was in a city context. We have very different types of students in these areas. So that was what was really neat about this opportunity, because we could bring different ideas to the forefront and think about it in terms of how our students might react to these sorts of things. So we had 4 different types of materials that we focused in on. And again, for us, that idea of being some uniformity was very important. We had formative questions. These would be questions that typically you might put into a chapter to get students at the end of a section to kind of think about the material a little bit more. So these were questions that were more kind of like an application. Students had 3 choices to choose from. It was low stakes because if a student would choose something that was incorrect, we had a nice little statement. Oh, that wasn't quite the right answer here. Go back to this section and reread. You know, we gave them some feedback like that. But if they were right, right on the money, you got the right answer, and then we would explain it a little bit more. So for us, the formative questions weren't just questions. We also snuck a little bit of teaching into the formative questions. So this was a type of question that we were going to put into the chapters. We were going to use H5P, but we decided not to do that. What we decided to do is make it its own separate category in an instructor's manual type of thing. So we thought it would be easier because there were different types of LMSs that people use. People might want to modify it a bit. We thought that it would be easiest to keep it into a more traditional type of formatting. Summative assessments are your typical at the end of the chapter or at the end of a section. These would be the tests that students would take. They might get a couple of times to take it, but these would be the more traditional tests that people would take. Discussions. We are big, at least in the communication field, big into discussions. And so all four of us use discussions a lot. We all teach online. Some of us also teach face-to-face. It didn't matter what the forum was, but discussions, giving students that specific type of question that they could build upon and have an exchange back and forth. And then creative assignments. These were creative assignments that went above and beyond just a discussion about something. You were doing something, you were creating something. And that's kind of like harken back to my experience making that scrapbook for the National Communication Association journals. But what I'd like to do right now is just show you some examples of what we actually put into the manual, into LibreTexts, and what you can find on LibreTexts. So I'm just going to go through some examples quickly with you. How am I doing? Okay so far?
You have plenty of time.
Okay. So this was a page that I made a copy of to kind of show you what the different assets are in LibreTexts. And so these were the ancillaries. We had an introduction to the ancillaries so that people understood what we were doing, why we were doing this, and how we were doing this. We have our creative assignments, our discussions, formative questions, and then summative questions. The summative questions we decided as a team that since instructors would not necessarily like all of that information to be available where students could just kind of copy and paste an answer in, we kept that separate. So it's important to be a verified instructor to access the summative questions. And Delmar, did you go over with folks how to become a verified instructor and how to find the information?
Their accounts gives them verified instructor status, and
Okay,
we spent a handful of minutes in order to upload and
okay,
identify permissions for that. So the
okay.
machinery is in place.
Great, great. I think that's the real key is just getting involved with LibreTexts in such a way you can take advantage of all of these. And I want to tell you, I teach a lot. I've taught a lot of different kinds of courses, both at the university and at the community college. And for me, it's really helpful. I always check this out to see if there are any assets available to instructors. That is one thing I do every single time that if I'm looking for an OER, I do check that out. So there's the verified instructors. That's a little symbol there. I love it that it's the cap and gown kind of thing. So I wanted just to share a few examples with you. And if you've got some examples of your own, please feel free to kind of indicate you've got an example you'd like to share out in a little bit. So assignment number 3 in the first section. So we always identified sections and what the assignment would be so that it would be instructor friendly. Podcasting is a great way to share your ideas and knowledge with the world. And so in this example, you describe the role of culture in interpersonal interactions. You analyze examples of it, and then you articulate this through a podcast that you create. There's a lot of detail here, and we decided this would be a great small group communication. So think about how many people would be involved. Is this an individual, a duo, a trio, a small group? It's important to think about that. In this case, we decided that people would form a group of 4 to 5 people, brainstorm ideas, share examples with the group, and then list 3 pieces of advice for addressing the cultural differences. And then as a group, find 2 relevant quotations about culture and communication. use one quotation to begin the podcast and the second quotation to conclude the podcast. It's really up to you, but we found as communication instructors, students tend to succeed if they have enough instruction. Sometimes leaving it a bit vague, hoping they'll come up with it, just makes it impossible for the students to know, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I don't know if any of you have run into that with different tasks you've been assigned to do as an instructor. But if you don't know how to begin, that may be a kind of a roadblock or obstacle. So we carefully thought about this, how much instruction that we could provide here that could get students jump-started on an exciting project that would help extend their knowledge and experience with a particular notion. And again, all of this, because it's open educational resource, all of this can be modified, and we encourage instructors to take this, run with it, and make it their own. And then for positive communication climate, different activities that we had here, we tried to give suggestions. We gave the learning objective, the resources, etc., the prompts that are there. And again, I'm not going to read through all of this. It's there in the slideshow. And Delmar, will the slideshow be available to people afterwards?
If you'd like us to, yes.
Okay, that would be great. Would folks like to get a copy of the slideshow? If you are interested, I also put in my email address if you'd like any further information on some of the things we're talking about here.
I'll put it on the Academy Online course.
Okay, okay. Here's an example of one of the formative questions. It's a little scenario, and then we have the 3 possible answers. We wanted to keep it 3 possible because it's a way for students to check. And if they had an incorrect response, we gave them a nice little suggestion. Your choice is close to the correct, but there is a specific term used. And so we encourage them to go back. So even writing in positive feedback for students, even when they have to go back and recheck an answer, I think that's so valuable to students. It's like, no, I didn't just screw it up totally. I was close, but I need to go back and reread. I find I tend to have to do this a lot with some of the students that I teach online. And I do that through messaging. It's kind of nice when it's kind of built into the question itself. And then for the correct response, yes, 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 you chose the right answer for this question. And then you'll notice we put a little bit extra information in there, again, to reinforce and even extend what students are reading about. So we're kind of using these ancillary materials as a way to teach and not just to test students. And then summative questions, the traditional, we see often in instructors' manuals, we did this as well. And we had a number of multiple choice and true and false questions. And now, I'm going to take a moment here and have you think about this a bit. What was an activity or assignment you remember to this day that really engaged you as a student? I want to give you a little bit of time. And Delmar, is there time to go into chat groups, or we don't have time for that?
We can set up something like that if that works well for you. I
How
may
much
mention,
time?
I think you asked a similar question,
I did.
and there were a lot of responses back then
Oh, okay.
in the chat. I can certainly go through them if you would like.
Well, let's first ask Delmar if anybody would like to go ahead and share out what they wrote. I would love to hear this. I really would, because I want to learn as much as any of you do too. Is there anybody who's willing to share out a memorable activity that you remember when you were a student? Anybody willing to share out? Are you seeing any volunteers?
No volunteers.
Oh, I think I saw a hand. I think Joy. Joy, yay, Joy.
Sure. This was when I was in high school. I had a teacher who told us to go out on the somewhere and draw the location of the moon every day at the same time for 3 days.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Fixed point. And I noticed it was in a different spot every time.
Wow. See, I didn't even know that. I guess I don't pay attention that much. I think
Right.
that's really,
The moon is on a different cycle. So it's not going to be in the same spot at the same day. At the
okay.
same time. But that discovery activity where I had to draw
Yeah.
and see it myself, that it wasn't in the same place, was really powerful.
And I can see that. I can definitely see that because I mean, just you telling me about it, and now I'm going to go out and watch the moon tonight. I'm going to do that down here in Napa and see what it's all about. And when you completed the assignment, was it a drawing? Was it a little paragraph that your essay wrote? What was the outcome?
I just brought in my 3 drawings and then
Oh, nice.
yep, he
Oh,
asked students to look at them and then narrate what they observed, and then
awesome.
he explained it.
That is so cool. That is so cool. I love it. I love it. Is there anybody else who's willing to share? I like that example, Joy. Thank you so much. Anybody else?
No one wants to share. I can certainly read what they've written.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and read that? Because I'd love to know about this.
I'm going to go backwards in time. So Kelsey wrote the last one. My ESL methods teacher took me to a Buddhist temple and made me teach the monks on the spot with no preparation.
Oh, wow.
Unorthodox, but I learned real quick.
Oh, that.
She kind of tricked me. There was an element of deception involved, but
Oh, come on.
It really
Sure.
worked. And it was one of my favorite, cross-cultural experiences.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Well, it sounds like I can hear the smile in your voice when you describe it. And for me, that's what we as teachers want to hear in our students when they remember that. That is so cool. That is so cool. How long ago was that?
That was back in probably 2013.
Okay, so that's so you're talking 12 years ago now, and you still remember that.
Yes, absolutely. I would not have remembered it. In fact, I remember very little about being in her classroom, if that tells you anything. I remember being at the temple.
Oh, that is so cool. That's the excitement of learning and having that experience that both Kelsey, that both you and Joy had. I think that's awesome. That's awesome. Delmar, how about another couple if you've got a couple more to share out?
Kim goes back to her primary education, a science assignment in 6th grade on wildflowers in Texas, where she lived.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that one stood out to me because we had to go out and actually find all of the wildflowers that were in the area, and then of course we had to put them in a book and label them and their scientific names and everything. But it was something that I definitely remember forever.
That is so cool. That idea that you're creating something, you're learning about something and creating and sharing it with others.
Yes.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm down here house sitting for my grandkids right now. They're in Japan, so I'm house sitting a dog and 2 cats. That's why I'm tired today. But you're giving me great ideas of when they come back from Japan, things that I can have them do around here in the Napa area. That is so cool. I'm writing all this down, everybody. I'm actually learning from all of you right now.
Thank you.
Delmar, maybe a couple more and then we'll keep
Cynthia,
moving
a botany class that had a final test where they were dropped in the mountains and had to identify 15 plants using their manual.
Wow. Ooh, that's kind of like a scavenger hunt for real. Kind of like Survivor, I guess. Oh, that's cool. And what was the actual outcome? Was it a article or just checking off something on a list, or what was the outcome?
It was our final exam, so we had to go and we had to prove based on, when you're trying to identify plants, you have to do how many petals, how many sepals, and then all of that. So you had to, did we get it right or not? Did we identify correctly?
Wow, that's a great final exam. I love it. Oh my goodness, that's wonderful.
And the next one is by Joseph, and it's the first time that he was in a cadaver class.
Oh my goodness.
Smell, sight, touch, so much to engage with.
Yep. And what class was that one? Or how long
That
ago?
was a cadaver dissection class.
Okay.
When she got the hedge trimmers out is when it got really exciting.
Oh God. I would say that would probably be memorable. Yeah. Oh goodness. Oh gosh. Let's see. I actually see somebody's hand up. I think Aaron, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Hey. Okay, so I'm a geologist,
Okay.
and every geologist I've ever met, you can just walk up to them, and if you say something about field camp, then you have an instant connection
Oh.
because almost all of us have spent at least 4 weeks hiking and identifying rocks and drawing maps.
Okay.
And so no matter which university you do it with, everybody has some sort of like base experience, and it was amazing and difficult, and
Okay.
you were so tired the whole time, and you remember it forever.
I love that bonding experience. Oh, that's
Mhm.
wonderful. That's so cool. You can just meet anybody from another school or area of the world probably, and they would have had that
Mhm.
experience. I think that's great. Um, how about one more? Delmar, is there at least one more person you could turn to? And
Yeah, the last one is by Francis. In
okay.
eighth grade, we spent all year researching a notable American and then had a tea where all the teachers, students, and the parents were involved. We
Uh-huh.
dressed up as the notable American, stayed in character throughout the tea, and gave a speech about our life.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, I love that as a speech teacher. I love that idea. Seeing it from another person's perspective. That's great. How long ago was that?
Oh gosh, that would have been 96,
Okay.
1996.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. I
I
like
probably
that.
remember more about Eleanor Roosevelt than I do about any other research paper I've done since.
I think that's great. But I can see that getting into the character, kind of seeing things from their perspective. What would they say? What would they do in this situation? That sounds really exciting. In fact, I might kind of borrow that idea because now I'm starting to think ahead now a little bit for some of the assignments. But as you can see, ancillaries don't have to be boring. Ancillaries can be really creative. And I think the creativity that you can find in LibreTexts, because you can take the material and mold it. You can take the material and edit it and make it applicable to your students, your situation, the time frame that we're in. As I said, I teach public discourse. Boy, you can tell. I mean, when I have my students choose which speeches they're going to be doing for their assignment, for the rhetorical assignment, we avoid super political discussions because I want to get through the class. But we start to look at the rhetoric that's there. It's really exciting, and that changes as we go through things. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much for sharing those terrific examples. I might be in contact with some of you again after this and share some ideas, see what we can come up with. Okay. So there's some more questions I want to bring up, and I'm going to go ahead and how am I doing with time, Delmar? Am I doing pretty well?
Oh, yeah, you have plenty of time.
Okay, because I want to allow for questions and if there's any discussion too. But I came up with a whole list of questions, and being a speech teacher, I love having people engage in discussion. This might be where we do want to put people into chat rooms if there's time. But there's a lot of questions here, and obviously I don't want to talk about all of them. There's not enough time. But these are some things to think about. Do you check if an open educational resource has ancillary materials when selecting one? I'll be honest, I do. And in some ways it does influence whether or not I am open to adopting that particular OER. I really do that. How important is it that an open educational resource has ancillaries that accompany it when you're making a decision? What type of ancillaries do you find most useful as an instructor? It could be those old-fashioned test questions. I really personally like finding really good discussion questions that I can turn into a larger assignment. And then what types of ancillaries do you think are most useful to your students? And what's really cool with the ones we've just heard about, a lot of them are being engaged in activity where you're actually the explorer in this case, and that what you come up with is really, really valid, even if it's exploring who Eleanor Roosevelt was all about. As you said, you probably have a better understanding of Eleanor Roosevelt, even though I've taught her in my public discourse class. I've not taught her in that way. So I bet you've got a really good sense of who Eleanor Roosevelt was. And then if you've created, what types of ancillaries do you tend to create, or what have you shared? And have you yourselves created ancillaries for an OER in LibreTexts? And which one did you create ancillaries for? So I want people to have a little time to chat a little bit. So why don't we go ahead, Delmar or Jennifer or Justin, if somebody could set up some discussion groups. think we could do
Yeah,
that?
I could do that.
How many
Okay.
groups do you want?
How
Yeah.
many people are in the
We have
session?
25 right now.
How about 5 at the max? So there's 5 people per group.
All right, so do you want me to copy those or?
Yeah. Why don't you copy those? That'd be easiest for me if you could copy those.
Well, actually, Delmar, you have the slides, I think. Maybe you should copy and paste them in the groups. I'm gonna pause the recording for a second.
Okay, the slides have disappeared. Where have the slides disappeared to? Let's see if I can bring them back. Yeah, I think I
Probably
can.
should have waited until your slides are up to start the recording again.
Are we back to the slides? Okay, good.
Yep, I can see it. Great.
Well, I want to tell you, I was so excited. I learned a bunch of stuff, and I'm hoping that a couple of people in my group will definitely be in contact with me because they gave me some great ideas that I'm already turning around in my head here. So much for retirement. I've been retired for a whole, maybe a month now, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Is there anybody who'd like to share out? I'm going to watch time, but is there anybody who'd like to share out something that was discussed in your group? Erin, hint, hint, hint.
All right, hey y'all. I talked about geology earlier. I work for the American Meteorological Society, and I'm mostly in charge of writing our textbooks. So we have right now 3 textbooks, atmosphere, ocean, and climate that you buy, right? And we have like lab manuals that go with them, and they take you through where you get the data, how to graph or analyze the data, and then how to interpret it. And I write those mostly. I have lots of editors and content specialists and all that stuff. But right now we're working on taking our Oceanography 101 book to open, right? We're editing and then republishing on LibreTexts. Right now it's just a series of PDFs. So we have a professor that is retired and doesn't want his book to die with him. That sounds awful. So he's handing it off because AMS has existed for over 100 years and will exist into the future. And then the next one we're going to do is weather. Now, our business model here, because I don't get paid with like air, is to do open textbooks, and then those manuals the students buy, and I think they run $45 a piece. They're online. So that's our current working model. And what I'm really interested in here is, since I'm not a professor, I used to be a middle school teacher. So I'm interested in what kind of assignments y'all want. What can I give you that's going to make your life easier?
Good. And what I'm hoping is we can, I think I will start a Google Doc. Maybe, and if you are interested, just share information there. It can be a starting point, or even just sharing a contact information if you want to set up some discussions. And I believe Deborah, if I'm remembering the name right, Deborah, I think you had something cool with art.
Yes, hang on just a second. Let me I use a lot of Google Earth, SciArc, and Tapestry in my discussions and assignments, so that the student has the opportunity to go walk around an ancient site or even inside a museum today. And I send them on like a little treasure hunt. I give them a list of 5 to 6 items they have to find, write a 100-word response for each picture, and do a screenshot, and then put it in the discussion group, and then they talk about it amongst themselves, you know, where they went, what they saw, everything like that, how they found it. It's pretty interesting. I also throw in a little caveat. I make them find a restaurant nearby and go in and get the menu, just to make it, you know, a little bit of fun. So.
Oh, I like that. I might want to participate. Can I join your class sometime?
Yeah,
I think
anytime.
I could learn a line.
You can sign up through the CVC.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to share out something, just anything you talked about in your groups? And hearing none, last chance. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what we discussed in ours was how to look for that material, because when you're new, and it's, for me at least, it wasn't very intuitive. luckily someone was able to show us. So
Mhm.
as I look through OER material, I didn't know that there was material available, and I didn't know how to search for it. So it's a great benefit to be able to do that.
Definitely, definitely. And there's so many opportunities through LibreTexts, but there's so much. That universe out there is so huge now, but it's really exciting. But it is, once you get, and they make it so user friendly now with LibreText to be able to start to find things. So that's great. I will take an afternoon and just have fun looking at all these different textbooks in different areas, different disciplines that are not my discipline at all, but I like to, gosh, I guess I need more of a life. I enjoy looking at ancillary materials because I actually think, oh, that's a cool idea. And I'm hoping to stay in touch with a couple of you already because I'm real interested in what you're doing with your ancillaries too. Well, I'm watching time here. A good speech teacher always ends on time. But I wanted to share with you, this was a part of a paragraph that I wrote as an introduction to the ancillaries. And it was kind of like, for me, and this was from a couple of years ago, wrapping up my 45-year career as a professor of communication, working on this textbook, etc. It's kind of like what Aaron was saying about the one professor who was hoping that, I'm going to say it differently, Aaron, that hopes that his books lives on. For me, this was a legacy project to really share with others, especially newer professors. That's kind of who I was thinking about, ones that would like to really get going on things, but don't know where to start. Maybe there isn't enough support. Maybe they're given a class at the last minute. Here's a starting point, but then to own it yourself along the way. For me, that's the legacy I wanted to leave. But I'm going on myself with a new achievement. On Friday of this week, I am getting some of my students' papers from spring semester published. They're going to be in digital commons, and I'm hoping to put some of these together for a LibreText book in the near future. In my public discourse class, I had students do rhetorical analysis papers, which were kind of a traditional one, but I had a format for them. But what's really fun, and I'm definitely a visual person, as you can tell, I keep playing around with AI all the time. I wanted my students to do a rhetorical visual presentation about speeches. So I gave them a number of different options. They could do like a magazine cover and a feature story in a magazine, but they would need to include photographs or images that would depict the speech itself. They could do a graphic novel. They could do a cartoon strip. I had different options that they could do. But what was really cool, everyone, was that one of my students came up with something that I had not thought about. And it was a brilliant suggestion. How about a collage? I remember when I was a college student, collages were kind of the in thing when I was in college way back when. And I guess they still are kind of into students today are into them as well. So I said, sure, why not? So I added it to my list of options. And that's an important part of ancillaries, giving students options so they feel a sense of ownership. So I included that for the first time, and it got some really, really great visual rhetoric representations. And one of the visual rhetoric presentations that are going to be included when it's published later this week is a kind of a graphic novel of all things, Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell speech. It was done using AI. And so we made sure we got everything was going to be legit here, because you need to think about that when you're using AI. And it was really a wonderful visual representation of key concepts of Dwight D. Eisenhower's farewell speech. So I'm really excited. So I'm into now the visual part of rhetoric, not only the verbal part of rhetoric. But that's the cool thing too about ancillaries. You can create ancillaries that keep you alive and excited about things as a professor. And I think that's, for me, Delmar, for me, that's one of the exciting things about LibreTexts. You keep me excited about learning, and I can learn from my students because of open pedagogy. So I would like to thank all of you for being such a great audience. And it's time to think about creating some of your own ancillaries for a LibreText open educational resource and share them with other educators through the LibreVerse, the world's most innovative platform for open education. So thank you so much for listening, for participating. And my email's down there. I will go ahead and create a Google Doc if anybody's interested. Just let me know if you're interested in being part of that, and I'll add you to my Google Doc. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all your contributions today. You're awesome.